Am I on live now?
Hey Dave, you are good to go.
Okay, you're not doing the intro for the 3-minute intro, or was that done earlier?
That's a very good point. We'll start with that and I'll bring you right back.
Okay.
Hello everybody and welcome to the 2021 Virtual Muskie Odyssey and the Toronto chapter presentation on the Lake Simcoe Muskie Restoration Project. Before we get started, I'd like to simply introduce myself. My name is Nick Evans. I'm currently the Toronto chapter chairman, and I'd also like to give you just a brief overview of the significance of the Toronto chapter within Muskies Canada. So for those who don't know, the Toronto chapter is the original founding chapter of Muskies Canada, which was created all the way back in 1978. Since that time, the club has grown significantly to over 13 chapters across the nation, with over 600 members who have volunteered their time in various research projects, conservation projects, telemetry studies, and stocking. Even though we have all been involved in various projects throughout the year, none of them hold as much significant value or effort as the Lake Simcoe Muskie Restoration Project. So today we have a special guest for you. He's the Director of Large in Toronto. His name is Dave Boxall, and he is an expert within the Lake Simcoe Muskie Restoration Project and one of the lead guys who's largely responsible for the project taking off in the first place. So we hope you guys enjoy the presentation today. It's going to be a great one, and I'll let Dave take the stand, guys. Have a good one. Enjoy.
Okay, I guess I'm on. There we all are we all got the same mother today. We have the same shirts. She didn't give us pants. I won't say anything more about that. So I feel a little insignificant with all the TV hosts, doctors, and our top guides in Canada. But I do have one thing most of them anyways probably don't have. My personal best is just under 60 inches, 59 3/4. So I don't think I'll ever outdo that one. My name is Dave Boxall. My friends call me Mr. B, and Mr. B came from the technical articles when I was doing writing for the Release Journal and some other magazines. The topic we're going to talk about today, I got going actually back in 2002, and it's going to be a brief presentation on Lake Simcoe Muskie Restoration Program. It's not going to be technical, well, slightly technical, but not technical, just plain English, and that's mostly for me, not you guys. Hopefully there'll be time for some questions at the end, so let's get started with this LSMRP. Okay, muskies were always native to Lake Simcoe, and I'll just mention right now Lake Couchiching, which is directly connected to Lake Simcoe at the north end. So anything we're doing to Simcoe reflects into Lake Couchiching as well. It was a world-class muskie fishery in the 1800s and early 1900s. And people used to come here just for the muskie fishing. So it would be like going to Lake of the Woods, Lac Seul, Eagle Lake, etc. Today. But back in those days, this was the destination they wanted to come to. It also had a massive commercial fishery as well as the sport fishing industry. Actually, a lot of the Kawartha Lakes as well had the same thing going on. But take a look. In 1904, and this is from actual records, there was 104,000 kilograms removed from Lake Simcoe. Now, it could have been a combination of Simcoe and Couchiching, I'm not sure. But these harvests, they just couldn't be sustained. Human growth also added to the problem of these large harvests, causing muskie to become almost extinct by the 1980s. Now, with human and farming explosion moving north of Toronto, the environmental conditions drastically reduced natural reproduction. You can see on the picture on the left-hand side, that is actually the mouth of the Maskinonge River in Cooks Bay. And you can see the large marinas, one extremely large, but there's several marinas there. And of course, the town there as well, and it destroyed the muskie habitat that was in that region. Also, we had a lot of phosphorus coming from the farms in the area and coming in primarily through the Holland River. You can see what it was doing to the water, and they said you could actually, and this would be 40, 50 years ago, you could actually almost get out and walk on the algae. I personally have never seen algae that's thick. Now, MNRF, when the program started, they were called Ministry of Natural Resources. They are now Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and they stock Kawartha Lake strain muskellunge fry and fingerlings into Simcoe from 1936 to 1969 with little success. Now, back in those days, they were the Department of Lands and Forest, I believe, is what they were called. And one of the problems that they had, as far as we can figure, the Kawartha Lakes strain of muskie, they're under severe strain themselves right now because of the northern pike invasion. And some muskies have learned how to deal with the spawning problems when the two are in the same waters, but the Kawartha Lakes have not. And because there was a large number of pike in Lake Simcoe, the problem was probably it was the wrong strain of fry that were being put in, and they're pretty sure this is MNRF. They're pretty sure that was the problem. Muskies Canada play a key role with MNRF in starting the project in early 2000. As I mentioned earlier, I actually was talking to Will Wegman, who's a technician with MNRF, who informed me that they were indeed wanting us to do the program. And when I informed the national executive of that, we started the program, and it started actually in 2002 was when I first became involved. Toronto chapter was the closest chapter at the time, and I was the chapter chairman, and we didn't have a chapter project where most of the other chapters had things they were working on. So, one and one makes two. Lake Simcoe Muskie Restoration Program was born. Now, in Canada, we do a fair amount of put and take with different species. In the States, they do it with muskie and other species. But so far, in Canada, we do not put and take when it comes to muskie. So there really was only one mission for us: to restore a self-sustaining population of muskellunge in Lake Simcoe. Now, in the beginning, we had to get some essential messages out to anglers and do some pretty essential things. One of the first things we had to do was close muskie fishing in both Simcoe and Couchiching. We couldn't have people going fishing for muskie while we were trying to reestablish population in those lakes, or at least in Simcoe. So that was the reason that we came out with these signs. Now, this is the original sign here. We'll talk about the others in a second, but with the original sign, the idea was Muskie fishermen know what a muskie looks like and what a pike looks like. A lot of other fishermen think that a muskie is a pike, and we did not want people taking muskie out of the water thinking they had a pike. Bob Azumi's Fishing Foundation actually paid for the first 60 signs, and you can see his foundation's emblem down there in the bottom left. Now, we originally only installed them around Lake Simcoe and Couchiching. However, as time has gone on, we have had the size limits of muskie increased on many, many Ontario waterways. And because of that, we were thinking there would be a problem with the same problem we were going to have on Simcoe, actually, where people don't know the difference and they may take muskie thinking they had a pike. So what we did is we actually, I believe we're in our third generation of signs. And to date, signs have been updated and installed around Ontario on a lot of different waters. And that was primarily because we didn't want people getting the fish confused, and especially with the larger size limits that you need to get now in many, many waters in order to keep a muskie, with the largest being 55 inches, I believe it is. Okay, we started out really slow as we didn't have much expertise in muskie. Well, actually, we had no expertise in muskie rearing, at least the initial group of us that started. There was a few people had done some things with rearing and feeding of muskie, but really there was none of us that had the expertise, and even MNRF was very limited in any expertise that they had to initially start the program. So we kind of started not knowing what we were going to do. We thought it was going to be a 5-year project, and $5,000-$6,000. We didn't really know what we were going to have to do for raising money. Now, I don't think I'm going to over exaggerate the figure here. For the 14 years that this program has gone on, between actual monies raised and spent in kind by different services and government agencies, as well as the volunteer time that has gone on, which is thousands of hours, I think we are probably, and I'm pretty sure this is a conservative figure, between $1.2 and $1.5 million to carry this project through the 14-year period. And we had no idea that we were going to have to raise that kind of money. The first year was 2004, and we paid a company who actually does this kind of work to get a pond ready for us. And for 2004, 2005, the fish actually came from Couchiching. We put the eggs in the pond in 2004, and early fall, we went to check to see how things were doing, and zero. We lost everything, and it was through cannibalism. In 2005, we used the White Lake Fish Cultural Station, I believe is their actual name, north of Kingston. It was kind of unofficial, but they had a section of one of their ponds that they were using to try to rear some of our muskie. And mid-August, I believe it was, they had to put them in Simcoe, and I believe we got 68 fish were put in as summer fingerlings. And the reason they had to put them in again was cannibalism. Now, we did use a pond as well in the Georgian Bay Fishing and Hunt Club. I think that was the name of it. And this pond, it did produce some, and I'll show you pictures in a minute. But both years, ponds were used, and the pictures I'll show you, you'll see what cannibalism does. we soon learned that we couldn't use the ponds, and the reason we can't use ponds is once the weeds start growing, you can't monitor what's happening until you go to take the fish out. Now, this is the pond up in Georgian Bay. We tried to electroshock the pond first using a backpack, MNRF staff, of course. And when that didn't produce anything, we got the nets out and we started dragging. You can see the pond was drawn down for the purpose of getting the fish. And we actually did get some fish from this pond. However, I don't know how much was put in, maybe 800, 1,200 fingerlings or fry, but that's what we got out of it right there. And that was 8 fish. Now, they were good. They were between a foot and 12 inches or 13 inches. So, 12, 13-inch fish, but boy, look at all the fish they were eating. So that was really all we got from an entire pond. And that's why we decided we needed to use a hatchery, not a pond. Now, this is a picture from our hatchery, cannibalism at day 27. And you can see the fish is just developed. You can see the eye and the mouth of the fish that it's eating there. So it's in the early days, and cannibalism has always been one of the biggest problems trying to rear muskie. The write-up here says that the feasibility studies were completed in the early 2000s, viable with water quality, habitat restoration, and restocking. It was actually done a little bit before that. The studies were started mid-1995, 96, something like that. And everything had to be a go. Otherwise, when I started getting stuff ready for this project in 2002, we couldn't have done it because MNRF wouldn't have allowed it. Now, we stocked 18,500 fingerlings and yearlings into Lake Simcoe between 2005 2017. Does not include the last year that we stocked. That's 1,400 fish per year on an average for a 13-year period. We originally said we would be ecstatic if we could get 500 healthy fingerlings to put in. And that was going to be for the fall fingerlings. Now, we would have a choice as we do this. One of the things that has to be done with the hatchery, I believe it was 60 fish, had to be euthanized and sent. I think they went to Guelph University. I may be wrong on the location. And it was for disease testing. And unfortunately, one year, lymphosarcoma was detected, and we had to euthanize the entire hatchery. So these numbers you're seeing, it says 1,400 per year as an average. Remember, one year, there was 0 went in. So these are pretty good numbers considering we were looking at 500 per year. Now, spring egg collection, it was in Gloucester Pool off Georgian Bay. We did it because similar DNA to Simcoe muskies, and these waters include pike. So the muskie are used to spawning with pike in that area. We decided not to use Couchiching simply because, and we also tried Sparrow Lake, the numbers were so small, we were afraid that we would impact on the natural reproduction of those lakes. But Gloucester Pool had a very large population, so that's why that was chosen. And it was an area that was easily accessible. The number stocked varied considerably from year to year due to Mother Nature, and between high, low water, hot, cold conditions, we got some real drastic changes that we had to deal with. Now, this is the original map for netting sites on Gloucester Pool. half of these probably didn't produce anything year one. And if they didn't produce anything, they were removed and they weren't reset. Some of them produced very well, some produced kind of so-so. But as the years went on, the number of sets that went out were actually drastically reduced. And we used to find that the muskies were actually, the females were not coming to some of the nets. They were getting used to it, and we were getting the same females for multiple years sometimes. Here's a typical trap net. We also used hoop nets in shallow water. Couchiching used hoop nets, but the majority of the nets were this trap net where you can see the floats for the wing and the fish would be directed into the net. Now, one thing that volunteers could assist on is assisting with opening these nets and getting the fish out. So what would happen is you would have a boat driven by MNRF staff. Usually a second MNRF staff, a technician would be in the boat, and 2 volunteers. And they would take the fish out of the net and record everything that they were taking out. You can see here, some kids call him Santa Claus. We here at Muskies Canada call him Jim Kelly. And he is probably the longest standing, not the oldest, because he's 6 months younger than I am, but he is probably the longest active standing member in in Muskies Canada, my old company. And he has been active since day one. He joined in year number 2 of the club, I believe, in Toronto chapter. This is an interesting slide here. This is 2007, a summary of all the species that came out of the net, the total catch and catch per unit effort. You can see we've got a long-nosed gar in the top picture. We've got, it's either a common carp or a channel catfish, but I think it's a common carp. And in the bottom, we've got a larger smallmouth bass. But what's interesting is when you take a look at some of the numbers that come out of here, and you got to remember, this is all the nets for the entire 2007 spring collection. Yellow perch, only 25. But I guess in the areas where the nets are, you don't find too many perch. Bullheads, they're everywhere, so I'm not surprised with that. Black crappie, I didn't know there was that many black crappie up in those areas. Muskellunge, 12. And that was a pretty good number too. Sometimes we'd only get 4 or 5 or 6 in a year. So that's pretty good, but all you need is 1 male and 1 female that's willing to give up their eggs and milt, and there you have a family. So 12 is not a bad number. Long-nosed gar, though, 228. I didn't think there was that many in Ontario. I guess I might have to go fishing for those. So every fish was recorded, measured, and then released that we got in these nets. And that's just an indication of the amount of work that was done when these nets were open. And you can see 5,185 fish in 2007. Pretty good number. Now, I left a lot of pictures out, actually getting the eggs, getting the milt. But after all that had been done, the one thing they did to every female and male that was captured, whether they would release eggs or milt or not, they were actually tagged, and a scale sample was taken or a fin clip to get a DNA sample. And the reason for the DNA was primarily so that, well, we can actually right now, if any muskie is caught in any way in Simcoe and someone takes a DNA, a fin clip, or they take a scale sample, we can identify if it came from and which year and family it came from from the project. So that's where the DNA comes into play. But that was done for every fish that we actually had. Love potion number 9. That's I gave it that name. I didn't put the number on there, but when I saw this picture, it's a typical muskie family on its way now to our hatchery. And why I called it Love Potion number 9, it's the Searchers song in 1964. And any of you young people who have not heard that song, Google it. It's kind of an interesting song. And release after processing, there's one of the mothers on her way back into Gloucester Pool, and none the worse for the wear, and probably still with eggs in her, because one thing muskies have learned to do is they keep part of their eggs hard so they don't come out in the first release, and later on they'll release another batch. So they actually spawn twice a year when they're trying to deal with pike. Okay, the lead hatchery was Fleming's Lindsay Hatchery, headed by fishery technician Mark Newell. He made significant new science developed by Mark, including varying use of dry pellets and live feed. Now, I've mentioned before cannibalism being a big problem. One of the things that he found was if you had a fish go cannibalistic, it had to be removed from the tank or they all pretty soon start going cannibalistic. So as soon as he noticed the fish doing that, he would remove it to a separate tank, not one of the 6 normal tanks, but a separate one that was kept for just cannibalistic fish. They were fed fish that they had from a pond right on the Lindsay campus, and that's how they dealt with those. They either survived until fall release or not. We also used MNRF's White Lake Kingston Fish Cultural Center, the Blue Jay Creek in Manitoulin and Harwood and Rice Lake hatcheries during the program. Now, these are the 6 tanks. The original 6 tanks were made of plywood and fiberglass. We just didn't have the money to buy commercial grade ones, but we did replace them during the program with fiberglass commercial grade tanks, and they were about $3,000 a piece. So that had to come over and above our $15,000 each year. And between extra donations and tanks bought by certain clubs, fishing clubs like the Georgian Bay Club, we were able to do 2 tanks a year. So it took us 3 years to get these tanks replaced. Now, one thing you'll notice is on top of the tank, there is a blue styrofoam piece. One thing that Mark learned very early is if you keep the lights on and you keep the fish in a bright environment and people walking around, they get very skittish. And he was actually having some of them die. So he covered them up, and this is kind of like them being in the heavy weeds when they're first trying to grow. They liked the darkness, and they learned that it was time to be fed when they saw the light. So this was something that he developed, and it worked very well to keep the fish happy while they were in the tanks. Okay, this is an incubation tray. It's floating in one of these tanks. You can see the center piece there, the center white piece. You can see the eggs lying inside there. Now, these are the eggs under development, and the one thing at this stage that Mark would do, and Mark was tireless. Him and his student crew, they would work 24/7. He would actually go in, and any hard eggs or bad eggs, he would simply take tweezers and remove them one at a time. And with 6 tanks going, you can imagine the amount of work that would have been. Now, muskies absorbing the yolk sacs after swim up, as they come out of the eggs, you're going to have the egg sac, and you can see the top one's probably come out recently. The bottom one has been out for a while. When the egg sac disappears, that's when they're starting to look for food. Now, to keep them on dry feed, first of all, has been very difficult. No one has been able to take them past about the end of August, maybe early September. Mark actually was able to keep them on dry feed through experiments that he did right up until the next year, because one year we had to keep some and release them the following spring, and he was able to keep them on dry feed. However, there's another problem. You have to convert them about a week before you release them to live feed, because I don't think anyone's going to stand out in the weeds and feed these guys their dry feed. So you can see the problems there. This is a typical clock feeder. It's just a wind-up or battery-operated clock. The hour hand goes around, and as it goes around, there's a plastic piece on the end, and all it does is sweep the little round piles of dry feed you can see around the edge of the clock, and it goes down through the slot, and the fish get fed. So once every hour, they will receive their feed. Okay, here we are. This is actually the fall fingerlings in a release tank. So they're getting ready to be released into Simcoe. There was a lot of work done to get up to this stage, but these fish would be between 7 and 9 inches. Now, why fall fingerlings? Well, we had 3 choices. You can do first of all, summer fingerlings, which imprint, which means they know where to come back to spawn. Once they grow up, they imprint excellent, but survival rate is very low. You've got fall fingerlings, which are much larger, and they will imprint, at least the majority will, and their survival rate is much, much higher than summer fingerlings. Then you have yearlings, which survival rate's about 100%, but imprinting is extremely low. So and plus the other fact with yearlings, the cost is double to take them what you would have to pay to bring them up to this stage at fall fingerlings. So the logical ones is get them to a stage that they're going to survive or have a good chance, and then they will also imprint. So that's where fall fingerlings. And just to give you an idea, we did some figuring, and to bring them up to this stage was between $70 and $75 per fish. So this is one of many tanks that would have been put into Lake Simcoe each year. So you can see, it's very expensive. Excuse me. Okay, this is a typical stocking habitat that you can see. Sometimes they were released from nets in boats. Sometimes we'd have people wade out and just release them. But the sites were determined by MNRF for protection from predators, available feed, and suitable for reproduction. Now, I had to make this slide up here to show you the different locations. I hope I have the arrows in the right areas. Barnstable Bay, Talbot River and its shoreline, Morning Glory Swamp, southeast shoreline of Georgina Island, and the west shore of Cooks Bay. One of the first ones I did was west shore of Cooks Bay during a snowstorm, an early snowstorm. Now, some of the partners, major partners we worked with, the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. They were like the police of the organization, because if there was something we wanted to do and there was some reason they said, no, you can't do that, we just didn't do it. So we worked hand in hand, arm in arm, toe in toe with these guys. And I have to tell you, when it came to people who were dedicated, the biologists and technicians that were involved from MNRF, they were just as dedicated as Muskies Canada people are. And you people out there in Muskies Canada, you know what I'm talking about. Fleming College, the Lindsay campus, because of our because of the work that was done there to raise the fish. Becker Foundation and Muskies Inc. And that's financial support we got from them, I believe, for 3 years in a row. Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters with financial support and support with people who came out to help us. Spring Fishing and Boat Show. And one of the nicest things that Andy and his wife, who support us 600%, that they have done for us is the Muskie Sunday, which is one of the best half-day events that goes on every year, except for this year and last year because of COVID-19. Federal and Ontario government agencies, different agencies were involved, and the Aurelia Fish and Game Club and other local organizations. Our contribution, key role with MNRF in getting this project off the ground, and we worked hand in hand with them all the time. Planning and coordination of the project with MNRF and Fleming College, and there were several meetings throughout the year and even in the off season during the winter that we would have getting ready for the next year. And I would say at our tables we probably had between people on the phone and the actual people at the table, probably at least 10 to 12 people for every meeting. Financial support for Muskies Canada originally, we had to come up with $15,000 per year in the initial years, and then for the last 5 years, $25,000 a year. And one thing that myself and the people involved raising the money and looking after this program for Muskies Canada, we never went in the red and never had to ask for money. We were in the black the entire time this project went on. And I guess, yes, I'm pulling my own bells and whistles here and the other people on there. But when you look at the number of dollars we had to raise, that was quite a feat. Hundreds of hours of volunteer time each year on the planning, fundraising, egg collection, and stocking went into this. Exposure. Well, there was a huge amount of positive publicity, TV, radio, magazines, you name it, YouTube, it was there. In 2010, the federal government came up with a new award in Canada. We were the inaugural winner of that award, the top fishery conservation project in Canada for 2010. Also, this program that we're talking about was the major reason Muskies Canada and Muskies Inc. jointly won the North American Conservation Achievement Award in 2012. And at that, there was some 10,000 fisheries research scientists from around the world. They could not believe we accomplished what we did as a small club without any paid employees. Now, when this started, we had less than 400 members. We're somewhere between 600 and 700, which is still a very tiny national club. So that's a huge endorsement for the efforts of our members and volunteers. Exposure for Muskies Canada. We were well received. We well received presentations at the World Muskie Symposium in Ottawa in 2014, and again in Minneapolis in 2016. We developed tremendous working relations with many top conservation groups, including OMNRF, Fleming College, OFAH, Spring Fishing Boat Show, Becker Foundation, and many, many more. The way forward. Well, the project is completed now, and they're reasons for that. The primary reason was, unfortunately, we weren't sure we were going to be able to make the amount of money required, that 25,000 for the last year. So that's why we only did the 14. We also had that's donor, the financial part. That it was just hard to get money. Volunteer fatigue. I started this in 2002, and it's now 2021. So I've been at it with this project and been involved for 19 years. That's a long time to stay with a single project, and it's just. And then donor fatigue too. That could be the mummies who don't want to donate eggs anymore. It was supposed to be a 15-year term as recommended by Dr. Castleman, 3 life cycles. We did 14, so we didn't do too bad. And Dr. Castleman, if anyone does not know him, and most people probably do, when it comes to Esox maskinonge, he is probably the #1 expert in the world regarding this fish species. Over 20,000 fingerlings were stocked into Lake Simcoe, which when we were originally thinking we would do 500 fish for 5 years, that's pretty good. Now, monitoring programs such as electroshocking and netting can go on for several years as time and money permits. And we're going to have to keep the season closed on Lake Simcoe and Couchiching probably as well, until we can determine if a self-sustaining population has been established. Post-2019, let nature take its course, and it's up to the fish. They have to do their own thing now. So in conclusion, Lake Simcoe Muskie Restoration Program has been the most expensive conservation project ever. We should all be very proud of what we have accomplished in this very small club. Now, I don't know if there's time still for questions. Is there, Lisa? What was the food source found while collecting these muskies in those trap nets? Shad, perch, red horse? That's something that I can't answer. But the one thing I can say is the 2 times that I was involved in taking the fish out of the nets, I didn't find any food source in there. So if there was a food source in there, it was eaten by the fish when they were in the net. Great talk, Dave. A lot of effort goes into a project like this. Big tip on that, everyone involved. Well, thanks, Sean. There's a guy who's done a lot for muskies himself and one of the doctors. Social media has promoted a few muskies being caught on Simcoe. Are they still a protected species? Yes, they are. And what should anglers do if they catch one other than simply release it? If you can without harming it, my suggestion is, and remember, I'm not a biologist, but my suggestion is if you can release it safely and get a good picture with, at least if you can't get a picture, get a tape measure of the length of it, and if possible, get a scale sample so that it can be DNA tested. And I think that's it for myself. So I enjoyed talking to you people, and tight lines.
Dave Boxall, thank you so much, sir. What a great pleasure to have this show, and Toronto and the rest of the Muskies community sure has appreciated it. And I need to remind not only my producer, but everyone who's watching on the Toronto page that we are going to be removing our stream. If you want to keep receiving this content, jump over to Muskies Canada Official. We're going to keep going. We are in full speed ahead. I can tell you that I